Maybe this one should have stayed buried in the desert. The Mummy is next.
Welcome to a new world of gods and monsters.
I saw her. She is real.
Please meet Princess
Ominous.
She will claim what she has been denied.
Welcome to Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, the podcast where we review movies that were overhyped but did not make it in the box office or were a critical failure. In some cases, they succeeded with both, but not the hardcore fans. I am your host, Robert Moda, and joining me today, I have Mark Kirkman from Adrenaline Cinemas and Panels of Pixels. How's it going, Mark?
Hey.
So today we are reviewing the movie The Mummy, 2017 film edition of The Mummy with Tom Cruise. So The Mummy is basically they're touting it as more as an adventure, an action adventure fantasy movie, not a horror movie.
Mhm.
So that one was actually this movie was actually directed by Alex Kurtzman and written by David Koepp, Christopher McQuarrie, and Dylan Kuzman. It stars Tom Cruise, Annabelle Wallis, Sophia Boutella, who plays the mummy, and of course Russell Crowe and Jake Johnson, who is he starred, I believe, in was it That Girl or something like that, or
Uh, the new girl.
New Girl. That was exactly where he started. Yeah, he was also in Jurassic Park or
Jurassic
Jurassic
World.
World,
Yeah.
actually. So. Yeah, so this movie was supposed to start the Dark Universe, which, of course, when you look at the movie Dracula Untold, I believe, or what is it, Untold? That was actually supposed to
Untold.
be,
Yeah.
Untold. That was actually the one that was supposed to really kick off the Dark Universe. And then the Mummy was really with Tom Cruise supposed to set it all off. But after this movie came out, there was a budget, I believe, of $125 million to $195 million from what I've been told. Box office on that was only 410 million, with about 90 million in the United States. So this movie totally fucked up the Dark Universe, to try to kick it off, which is
Yeah.
sad
Yeah.
because it's just, and there's a lot of things that happen with this movie, and we'll get into that. But what are your thoughts on this movie and what it could potentially have been?
Well, it had potential. It was something that I was looking forward to seeing, but I was kind of skeptical in the very beginning anyway, so I didn't rush out to the theaters. I waited till it was out on digital download to actually watch it. And my first impression, well, obviously it didn't capture my attention because I fell asleep halfway through the movie when I first watched it at home.
You weren't the first.
And that told me right away, all right, this didn't really grasp my attention enough to further it because it was too much plot in the very beginning, too much talky, not much action. And there was a bit of humor in there because Jake Johnson is just being the typical Jake Johnson character that he normally is in any film or show, which
Right.
is fine. He plays that character perfectly. Kind of sarcastic, kind of like offbeat humor that he gives.
Right, right.
The typical Tom Cruise of being very intense and smoldering, as he usually is, which is fine. We get the action out of him, which is perfect. in certain scenes, but it just dragged in the very beginning based upon the story, and it kind of lost me after a while, mainly for the fact the way they represented it. If you look at the 1999 version with Brendan Fraser, it's based and rooted within what Universal was looking. It goes to Egypt. You get a mummy, or they're
Right.
chasing the gold of a particular pharaoh which was mummified, or if not, they stumble onto this one. This did not happen. They kind of stumble and go, "Oh, there is an artifact or whatever," and then they have to go through all these things, and then you get Dr. Jekyll himself involved, and we find out this person that's pretty much like a historian or somebody that's searching just like Indiana Jones for all these artifacts.
Right.
You find out she works for him, and it's like, oh, okay, but then Tom Cruise gets sucked into it as a chosen one, reversing the role of what anything would be, because Rachel Weisz in the original 99 version gave us that not only comedic wit to a character, but also you cared for that character
Right.
because of her passion. Brendan Fraser played, that doofus comedic wit, but also the action hero. All I got out of more drama, Tom Cruise, smoldering, Jake Johnson as the comedic side, and you don't get the I'm forgetting the character from the 99 version. I will make comparisons to like that, but honestly, it's funny though. It's like the one character is like, we're on the other side of the river. You don't get anything like that as a
Right.
joke to keep us entertained, but everything is so rooted in the sense of like pushing, pushing, pushing to
Right.
build up. Whereas with the other one, it was more action, fantasy, kind of a rom com, but it entertained multiple people, which to me, they could have gone the horror side of it, which would have been more universal monster oriented, which should have been,
Right.
or they could have gone that Abbott and Costello mummy kind of thing, and it could have worked in
Right.
that respect as well. And they could have still did that with Jake Johnson himself, but I'm not gonna wait for him to go to Tom Cruise,
Right.
but it had promise in the idea of what they wanted to do with the Dark Universe. They weren't able to create that at that point, like the MonsterVerse did with Godzilla and King Kong.
Correct. And it's funny because when I see this movie, to prepare for this podcast, I actually saw all three. I didn't see the one that was after the 1932 one. There was one that was done in color.
Yes.
So I didn't see that one, but I did see the 1932 one, in which I'm gonna be one of those very few people in, I guess, the world that I found it boring, and I did not like that movie at all. I own it,
Oh,
and
I
and
own it as well. I've all the Universal Monster collections on DVD,
yeah,
and I'm just with you on that part too. It kind of puts you to sleep.
yes,
And the funny thing is about that, you want to see that character more, but more with other monsters. And they had an opportunity in the 30s and 40s to do that,
right,
but they chose not to. But it's still part of the Universal Monsters lore. It's not one of their strongest of monsters that they have for the Dark Universe, or if we want to call it for that, for Universal Monsters. And yeah, they kind of nailed it though with Brendan Fraser's take. The
Brandon
first
Fraser Straight
two,
was one of those things that, so I mean, there's a lot of things that went wrong, of course, with the one with Tom Cruise, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But
Yeah.
one of the things that when you compare, like, let's say the one from 1932, and then, of course, the Brendan Fraser one, the 1999 one of the things they did, of course, was they made it fun, which is
Yes.
great. You know, it was a fun movie. Brendan Fraser being, of course, a bankable actor at that moment, good looking guy, young, still able to be in a movie that can attract an audience to come into the theaters. It was at a time when visual effects were taking off in a big way. So the
Hmm.
sand effects was very big. So that it was a big thing where it's like, wow, they're manipulating sand and that's such a cool way, the way they do that. You
Hmm.
also see the mummy on how you could see the parts inside him, and so those visual effects were groundbreaking, at least at the time. So they were actually, nowadays you watch something like that and you're like, whatever. We've oversaturated, I think,
Yeah.
the entire film industry with such great visual effects that nowadays there's nothing you really can't imagine that you cannot do, and people expect that. But one of the things about the Tom Cruise version, I think, is that one, what I believe that happened there, because it really got bogged down in the bullshit of, hey, it's Tom Cruise. He's going to be able to bring anybody in. One, Tom Cruise actually on his contract, he had a lot of control on that movie. He had the rights for editing, the rights for, if he had to direct parts of it, he had a shitload of control. And this is one of those situations where
Yeah.
he should not have been given that much control. He probably thought he knew what he was doing,
Hmm.
and in this case, he didn't. Right? It's the same thing, like like let's say Top Gun Maverick, which he had also a lot of control there. But that movie made $1 billion, and yes, he did pretty well on that. But on this one, he missed the mark big time. And you
Yeah.
have great actors. I mean, Russell Crowe being such a great actor. My biggest thing about, and from what this is what really gets me, is that from the rumors is that Tom Cruise downplayed the character of the mummy itself so he could have more screen time
Hmm.
than the mummy, than Sophia
Patella.
Botella.
Hmm.
Um, but having her be such a beautiful, I mean, she's a beautiful actress already, but I think for the part of the mummy, she was way too beautiful for that. I don't know. Maybe, I mean, this is like, for me, it's like it's a universal monster, and she should still look like part of a monster or
Yes.
something like that.
They
And
try to get away with that, and just to give a little reflection and to comparison too. Take that from the 30s version of the Mummy to this one. The
right.
double eyes inside the eye. You have
Uh-huh.
the two. Uh, they had that in the original as well.
Did they really? I don't recall them doing that, but maybe I'll have to go back and see that.
I remember that being a key part of it. That kind of scared the crap out of me. It was kind of like a short, weird thing that they did.
Right?
They didn't do that in the 99 version,
No, no.
but the thing is that they were trying to root it a little bit in horror, or that particular horror. They try to give it a shot, and usually, like you stated, with Cruz, him and his control, he's great for action, but he has to be there. His face has to be there. He's the
Right.
moneymaker. Mind you, the man is 60 and he still looks like he's 30.
Yeah.
And, God bless him, but, and whatever Scientology cocktail he takes. But the cool thing is that he is an audience grabber. He will. But I think that stems from his action films, like Top Gun.
Right.
Definitely the Mission Impossible series, which he owns and takes care of with his own film company. He knows how to lock that in. That was a poor idea of him given control within this. I think. I
Oh
think
yeah.
my thought is that he should have been brought in as a face, yes, but not as the main face. The main face should always be the the marquee, whose name is on the
Right.
marquee.
The
What
creature
character is
itself.
the
Right.
creature itself? And a lot of movies back in the day, And me being a Godzilla fan, a huge one, and I love the lore and everything, and I love the old movies. The one thing that every kid, while growing up, me being a Godzilla fan, all of them hated was that we don't see him until the end of the damn movie. Well, literally throughout this, you only get glimpses and portions of her, and it's very much similar to that.
Right.
And within years of like whether it be a Marvel movie, whether it be let's say a large monster movie, even with Godzilla, well the first incarnation when we got when they rebooted Godzilla for the new movie company that's out there that that spawned the MonsterVerse. That
Right.
first movie you didn't see Godzilla till the very end. That was a big thing. But by Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters, Pacific Rim, that's another one that's out there. It's not part of the MonsterVerse, but
Right.
that's literally what launched it. That brought the people that going, I want to see kaiju films. But they are starting to realize you have to put the major part of it in the film a lot of the time to grasp the audience's attention. Because if they don't, they're only going to get bored and say, I didn't get what I wanted out of this. That's like going, hey, we got WandaVision, but all I saw is Agatha Harkness during the
Right.
show or something like that. Or like it says the Avengers, but I didn't get to see the Avengers until the very end.
And that's true. I mean, it again, we could like do such a deep dive on this movie, which is to me, for at least for this episode, is not going to be one of the. I mean, you could see tons of those things online and stuff like that. My whole thing is like, how can we fix this movie? Because look, this was supposed to start the Dark Universe. As a matter of fact, I remember Variety did um a spread where they showed all the actors that was supposed to be in the Dark universe. So Johnny Depp was going to be the Invisible Man.
Mm-hmm.
Angelina Jolie was going to be the Bride of Frankenstein. I forgot who Javier Bardem was supposed to be, but that was announced and that was actually put out there,
Mm,
and they made such a huge deal about it. And it just seems like they could not grab this entire universe the way they think they could, like Marvel did, right? Once Marvel did their entire universe, everybody wanted to do a universe, as we know. It
yeah,
just, this was just, again, this was just a movie. And just like DC is having their problems with their movies, no one that is doing a franchise or an IP has what Marvel has, which is a Kevin Feige, who is not only
yeah,
a person with a tremendous vision, but also a person who is a big fan of the property itself.
correct.
So for me, I mean, something like this, I mean, they did the first one, Dracula. They tried to do this one, The Mummy. You
Mm,
and I were talking about before the podcast, how The Shape of Water
yeah,
was a great creature movie, and it was rumored that this was really like almost a prequel to that picture. I mean,
yeah,
and that's a movie that honestly, because when people say, yeah, it's a monster movie, how good could it be? Well, guess what? The Shape of Water, 13 Oscar nominations with four of them, for one for Best Picture and one for Best Director. Can it
yeah,
be done? Absolutely. You just got to have somebody who's super passionate about doing a movie that can have a great story and really, really grab the audience.
yeah.
And this movie just didn't do that. As a matter of fact, this movie, like you said, you were bored. And I've known a lot of people that have watched this movie, and they all told me the same thing. I was so bored with this movie, and because it tried to be several things. One, it tried to be a horror film, which it really didn't do well with
No,
that.
honestly, it was more of an adventure action film,
Exactly.
but with a long, broad story that wasn't very fully achieved or written well.
Right.
The only other one other than The Shape of Water, and it probably is what spawned and made them salivate at Universal years ago. It was done, and it's kind of overlooked. Benicio del Toro. Yeah, Benicio. Is it del Toro?
Who did The Wolfman?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Wolfman actually did very well.
Believe it or not, I mean, The Wolfman actually has a well, I mean, a critic score is pretty bad. I mean, I don't know how it did with the audience,
The
which
audience
is some
apparently liked it. I actually enjoyed that film, and I
right. Oh,
he
I
was
enjoyed it too.
he was looking to push more of the Universal stuff as well at that time. So it probably gave a good, quick, swift kick in the pants to Universal, saying, "Well, we're seeing all these other IPs, and they're all making their own universes out of this. We
Right.
could bank on this as well." What they should have did was started out with one, put it in there, see how the water is with their
Right.
dipping their toe in it, and then declare it a dark universe.
Well, which is what they try to do, I believe. I mean, with like Dracula, they were like, okay, so Dracula Untold was really a standalone movie, but then once the whole mummy thing happened, then they decided to put that post-credit scene in there and said, "Oh, let's just, let the mummy be the one that actually kicks this off, not not Dracula Untold because, Tom Cruise is in it."
Mm.
But I don't know, and by the way, I just looked at the box office takes for The Wolfman. So The Wolfman had a budget of 150 million. It only made 142 million worldwide. So
Really?
it was a big bomb.
I saw that in the
So
theater. Wow.
I
I
liked it a lot. I thought the Wolfman transformation was superb.
correct. Yeah.
Um, and of course, this was a movie that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Rick Baker was actually on
On board with
involved
the
with
physical
involved
effects.
with this, yeah.
The more
But
practical effects. Yeah.
but it followed more of the Universal monster Wolfman as opposed to more of the what I would call the new Wolfman out there that looks more like a canine than really a Wolfman. But that going back to the Mummy, yeah, it just was one of these movies that from having an actor who tried to control the movie way too much,
Hmm.
having a story that wasn't really cohesive, having a creature that I believe could have been done better,
Mm-hmm.
um, which wasn't. I think the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde one was not bad. I mean, I
His
didn't
yeah,
mind
his
that.
interaction was really good. I
Right.
it made me look forward to something. Hey, well, because he started changing within the scene, and he was trying to
Hmm.
control the Hyde, and you did get to see a little bit of the Hyde perspective out of him.
Right.
Now, mind you, it's not a lot of it wasn't in the ridiculousness of that old Hugh Jackman movie Van Helsing,
Oh
if you
my God.
recall that, which
Yeah.
I always found entertaining because I just love Hugh Jackman, but the effects were a little bit over the top and the scenes were a little bit outlandish. But I thought and I enjoyed it because it was more action adventure. That didn't do as well. But the story wise, let's talk about how we could fix
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
about
and
our
and I think
fall
there's
grace of it.
yeah, because one of the things I forgot to mention was this movie was not only trying to be a horror film, but it was also trying to be a comedy. And so let's start with that. It's like Tom Cruise is not a comedian.
No, he's not.
Has he played comedic roles in the past? Yes, and they have landed pretty well. This was just not one of them, and especially with um his other character, Jake.
Hmm.
What is it? Jake Johnson. Jake
Yeah,
Johnson has always been that comedic role, and I think that should have just
it led to that. Here's my take on that, and they could have just left him as he was because if you look at how Nick was dealing with Vale, and Vale was Jake Johnson's character, and he was a ghost, and he was cursed, taken that literally as you see him, and he was kind of decayed like a zombie. That
right.
was taken straight out of American Werewolf in London, if you think about it.
Oh, was it really?
If you look at the character and the way, like, Nick could only see him, Tom Cruise's
Right.
character could only see him, and he's there with
Yeah, that's
advice,
right. You're right. You're right.
and that's like it's literally taken from that, and from that point of view of how that movie was made. So they're kind of stealing ideas and thoughts of how certain movies were able to make it. Now, mind you, Jake Johnson was perfect for the character he played. I wouldn't change that character. I would just give him more of a guiding role, but
Right.
leave the jokes and bad humor to him, and then make Nick or Tom Cruise as the. You could keep Tom Cruise, just don't make him the consistent part of the movie.
Correct.
Make
And
him
that,
and make him the straight man, like the Abbott and
yes.
Costello of the situation, but him dealing with the curse aspect, but more interaction with the mummy itself.
First, I wouldn't even have him in the military. I honestly thought, it's funny enough, I thought that was insulting to the military having these two guys that all they were in the military and what they did, is just basically go ahead and, and try to rob, these grave sites and all these things to put,
They literally pulled a Three Kings kind of heist.
correct, so so I don't know. I wouldn't even do that. I mean, if they want to be mercenaries, if they want to be treasure hunters, then I think I would have gone that route first,
Yeah,
instead of trying to, maybe the military gets involved or something, which
but
is
they
fine.
were far from the mark. They weren't anywhere near Egypt. They already said it. It's like, oh, we're thousands of miles away from Egypt. We're near
Right.
Iraq. What is this temple doing here? This makes no sense right offhand.
Yeah, so I think we should have like reined that back and just bring it back to Egypt. That
Yeah,
was the first thing, because that's where I think it should have, stayed there. That and the fact that, like you said, making Tom Cruise. First of all, let's not give Tom Cruise any control whatsoever on this movie. Um, I think in order to, so here's where my fantasy cast would be on this. If I was really serious about this movie kicking off the Dark Universe, I would have gotten and given him a metric ton of money to direct this movie would have been Guillermo del Toro.
oh,
I would have
Guillermo
told him,
is perfect for it because his
right,
love, if you ever look at his house, because he's had pictures taken in it, he's got everything is stacked with Universal or classic monsters, and
correct.
he has a love for the genre.
He has a passion and love for this. And I think if I would have been Universal, I would have said, listen, we're just going to pay him whatever he wants, but he's going to be our Kevin Feige. So that
Correct.
means that he will probably direct the first movie, and then he will have absolute control from this point on every Universal monster movie that comes out, on how he thinks is going to all be, one cohesive universe that will work. So that to me would have been my first thing. It's like, all right, I'm going to put Guillermo del Toro as the director for that.
I would also
Um,
put him in. He's also a screenwriter, and I have
yes,
him down for screenwriting. But honestly, another far fetched idea for possible screenwriters to me would be David Lynch, or
he's a little far out there.
he is, but he can do horror.
He can.
And then John Carpenter.
John Carpenter is another one that actually would have done. I think John Carpenter would have done a very good, with as long as he, still kind of respects the fact that Del Toro is like the person heading this. But I think he could have been a great director for one of them. So I think honestly that you could have gotten all these great horror, especially those classic horror films that we know about, and those great directors. Again, you have John Carpenter,
Hmm.
you have as you mentioned, um what's his name? You just mentioned them.
Oh, Del Toro, David Lynch, John Carpenter.
John Carpenter. There's a few others. Who's the other guy? I mean, there's a few.
There's a few that could dabble within.
Yeah,
Raimi could do it as well, but you would just keep
Raimi is
him
another
on.
one. That's what.
I would only keep him on for writing purposes, and I think he could be able to come up with a regular script, which is fine. But
Right,
just having his name in the credits and doing dialogue would be perfect.
right.
And he could actually give something more Jake Johnson with his humor.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying that humor cannot be put into this thing, but I think that the the point of this whole thing is, hey, can we make a dark universe? Can we make a mummy that pays homage, homage to the original?
Hmm.
Um, pays a little bit of homage of, to the Brandon Fraser one, but just enhance it enough where it's like, hey, this is now the new. This was such a totally far, far from the what the original is. And
Mm.
even though they did bring little dialogues here and there from the originals, if you really,
You could
and
break it
I,
down to
yeah,
certain dialogue from the original
and
30s,
they did. They
but
bought little things here and there, but they were just so small that only hardcore fans will actually know about that.
and it was a little bit of an homage to the 99 Brendan Fraser series too with the book because they actually had the book there in the
Yes, they
film.
did. I thought that was actually very interesting. That's actually going up for auction on the what is it, the prop store or something like that.
Yes.
They actually have the golden one because there are two of them. There's one that's supposed to raise the dead. The other one I'm not sure was supposed, but there's one that's actually, and it's actually made out of bronze or something with real gold leaf on it. So they really went all out on this thing.
Yeah.
And the little box that opens like a star,
Yep. The
that
key.
is actually that right. The key is actually going up for auction, and believe it or not, they're bringing those two items together for the first time
Wow.
since they been in the movie because one item was actually owned by one collector. He had it for over 20 years, and then the other one was owned by another collector. So
Hmm.
for those of you guys who probably have deep pockets out there, you could probably go buy these two things together. But yeah, so they had that. I mean, so that you could pay, yeah, you could pay homage to a lot of those things, but let's just make it where first, I don't know, would you, and this is, and I'm not trying to be controversial, but would you make it a female mummy or will you still stick with
I
a
think they
male
were
mummy?
trying to change it for the times, which I understand.
Right,
I think in tradition form, you could always pass the torch to a female mummy. Now, if you remember, in the actual 99 version with Brendan Fraser, there was a woman as well as the mummy himself, and she was just as well involved. And Anaxana Moon
right.
was very much like the love interest of the mummy that was able to raise him. And she was very much part of that story, which is pretty cool. So you could literally have a male mummy, and at the very end, you could get a female mummy, in
Well,
my
remember,
opinion.
the mummy has always been a story about a woman in all the incarnations of it, uh, or it's a man's obsession with a woman. If you think about it, all the movies have basically been that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, you could definitely do that. It was funny as I look at some photos of the mummy from they because she's so beautiful.
Hmm. It kind of gave me
Sophia.
the vibe from Suicide Squad. Who was the witch in that? It gave me that
Yes,
look.
exactly. But they here's what they did. So as I look at her picture, so she has wraps
Hmm.
on her body, but then they put little wraps on her nose, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Well, she can't
"Ha-
sleep well, so those are no strips.
nose strips. Hey, listen, man, and when you're out in the sand, for I don't know for what 2,000 years or something like that, you know, sand will clog up your nostrils. But yeah, I don't know. I think to me that was a bad choice because it's supposed to be like wraps on her nose, but it's the shape of her skin. So whoever designed that, I don't know where they thought it was like, well, maybe we need to put some wraps on the face or something like
Yeah,
that.
to show even more
Yeah,
because
so I'm
literally
sorry. So we get out of the whole thing, but I'm just looking at her photo because I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, she was way too beautiful. I like the markings on the face. I thought that was actually a
the
really cool
markings of the
choice.
face was very good. I do agree
Yeah,
with that. The whole double eye thing for possession of the power of the mummy
that was
itself.
pretty cool.
The slight silk kind of wraps around her arms or around her
Right,
body, around her legs makes sense. It should have been a little bit more slight decay, pancake makeup, as it were, for like they did with Karloff back in the day. They could do
right.
that for more practical effects. Everything else was more laden within CG, and which is fine. I don't. It's great to intertwine, and this is something that I've discussed with Tom Savini himself and Christopher Nelson, who had done stuff for Halloween Ends, Kills, and the
Right.
remake in 2018. but they like the idea of including practical mixed with the CG. Now, the only people that have gotten it really down to a pack, down to like some sort of format or where it looks right is K&B artists. That's Nicotero and Kurtzman and Berger. They
Right.
That's K&B Effects. Obviously, Greg Nicotero has been dealing with The Walking Dead for years, and he knows how to integrate it. Now, he's also done other movies with Tom Savini himself, being a student of Savini. And over the years, Tom has learned even to build that with his craft with his students on how to merge that stuff where it looks fluid because it makes practical effects needed. Because you
Right.
need that physical aspect of the actual actor turning that. And Christopher Nelson did that well with Fear Street on Netflix with that series. They had three movies, and this they tried to, but it looked like to me that they were like we're just gonna leave it a little bit more with CG and just do some basic makeup
Right.
on
Well,
these
I mean, when you
people.
look at the Brandon Fraser one, I mean, the Mummy was all CG. The a lot of the effects were CG. But again, we're talking about at a time where that was just coming into.
And they wanted to show it in its all form,
Right.
very
And
much
it
like what they said in Jurassic Park, the original. It's like that's how the effects artists that were practical for years, and it's like when they saw the first CG dinosaur, and Alan Grant states it, and he goes because he was an archaeologist, and then you have all these people cloning dinosaurs, and like, well, Alan, what do you feel about it? Because I think we're extinct. And that was
Yeah,
coming
exactly.
from the point of view of effects artists back then. Stan
Correct.
Winston was doing a lot of the work integrating it, but over the past 15, 20 years since those movies were like highlighted and revered and all they did was CG, a lot of them going back to the old school of technically of merging the two together where it works. Because if you
Yeah.
don't, it's going to either look too unrealistic or you can't do all the effects practically that you want. So
Right.
marry them together and you got one good blended effects movie. And that's
Right.
my opinion. That's how I look at it.
Right.
I feel for the people that learn practical effects this day and age, getting their hands dirty, and they love doing that stuff.
Do you know that that so like the director Alex Kurtzman so Universal got so involved, and of course it was Tom Cruise who really changed the entire like we've been discussing, it changed the way this movie was supposed to be cut, directed, and stuff like that, that he denounced this movie completely. He said
Yes, he doesn't like it.
he doesn't like it. As a matter of fact, there is a cut out there, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where of what he thought it should be. I would love to see that, even if it's just a
The Tom Cruise cut.
yeah, well, no, this is the Alex, what is it? The Alex Kurtzman cut.
Alex Kurt.
Because the Tom Cruise cut we saw in the movies and that didn't
Oh,
work.
okay. So basically, it's a director's cut more than
Yeah, it's a
anything.
director's cut, but I'm sure it's more of a what I would call a like a rough cut or something like. I will see a rough cut with no effects or nothing like that just to see where the story was going to go.
Oh, very much like Zack Snyder's interpretation of the Justice League.
Yeah, exactly. Except Zack Snyder did a good job compared to Josh Whedon, but yeah, no, it's interesting that he did that. But like I said, and that's how I would start with that.
Hmm.
I mean, if possible, I mean, I'm not sure who did the effects for Shape of Water because those were amazing. That was an amazing
Yeah, the effects,
visual
the
effect.
physical effects were very good because you and I spoke about that about Doug Jones,
Right,
and that's the suit actor, and Doug Jones is known for many a monster in many a movie, and he played that perfectly, and he had to spend hours upon hours in the makeup chair getting the Shape of Water being that creature,
right.
and honestly, it works. And just if it works, don't try to fix it.
No, I know, right? How did you feel about the whole, like agency that knows that the dark universe exists, but the rest of the world doesn't?
Yeah, it's kind of like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and you got one person that knows that there's a multiverse, and they try to
Exactly.
control it from their universe, and then their universe gets all screwed up. Yeah.
So, because look, if we go back, there was Bram Stoker's Dracula, which had
Gary Oldman.
so
Keanu
Bram
Reeves,
Stoker's
Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder.
so you had that, which actually that was an excellent movie, and that actually, even though the one part that a lot of people criticized, which was Keanu Reeves' English accent. Other than that, I mean, it got very good reviews, I think,
Yeah.
especially with Gary Oldman playing the part of Dracula. You have, the Brandon Fraser, the Mummy. You have now The Shape of Water. I think, and I don't know how well this will work, but if somebody would have done it the right way, I think those movies could have been part of
Yeah. A dark
the
universe.
dark universe and just say, hey, we're going to bring in that movie from yes that was made 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's all going to be this, but now we're going to bring those characters into the mainstream of what it is now. Or here's another thing, because one of the things that it also got criticized, and I actually agree with this, the Brandon Fraser movie was a period piece. All
Yeah.
of them were period
They were
pieces,
period pieces,
right?
but you can still root them in modern day. Trying to get Gary Oldman back, honestly, that movie was 30 years old. So it is 30 years old because it came out in 1992.
But you know what? The aging technology is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, nowadays. But no, I'm just saying, so maybe him, you could bring him into it and
Mm.
then just have him like maybe try to look like a different person, which
Yeah.
could actually, work. But what I'm saying is maybe I mean, I think for me, I think I would have done the mum. I think I would have done like all the Universal monsters as period pieces. In other words, let the whole universe thing happen, but in the past instead of modern day,
Very true. Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, like
right?
they could still put Tom Cruise in there. You could put Jake Johnson in it, but they could be part of that time within 30s or 40s or whatever it was at
Correct.
that point. Or and then they could always state Dracula never got killed at the end of that movie, and then just say, "Oh, he slept for 80 years or whatever." And he comes back into that time when they're there, and yeah, and then you know Tom Cruise and Jake Johnson's characters could be uh, tomb robbers in
Right.
Egypt, and then they could still keep Benicio del Toro's Wolfman if need be.
Yeah.
And then same thing with The Shape of Water because that was a period piece too at that time.
Correct. And you could actually make The Shape of Water, because The Shape of Water, I believe, was probably the period on that, I think, was the 1960s.
Yes.
So you could kind of cap it off at the 60s. You could say, hey, so we had The Mummy, which was probably back in the 20s or 30s. You had Dracula back in, I don't know, the 1800s or the 1700s, whatever it was.
Late
Um
1800s, I would say.
or late 18, whatever it is. If you do an Invisible Man, that can also take place probably during Victorian age or something like that.
Hmm.
So you can have all these different period pieces, and then somehow it coalesce
Mm.
into the 1960s, where The Shape of Water could be the one that actually,
Ends the
bring
series of
right
monsters.
or brings it all together, right? Exactly at that point where all these monsters actually, it could be, I don't know, maybe even though it might be like the Invisible Man might be Victorian age, but he passed down the secrets to, maybe one of his ancestors or
They
whatever it is.
actually, I think they did that within the because there's three Invisible Men. There's three
Right,
creatures of Black Lagoon. There is total of I believe three Frankenstein's of the original Universal.
right.
I have a box set that has them, and you have like multiple discs. But the funniest is that they do have a way of getting these films out there. Now, mind you, a lot of them were redone by Hammer Films as well. So you don't want to incorporate that one in there.
No, exactly.
But yeah, you could have your own monster squad, as it were,
Correct.
and you
That's
don't.
a good movie, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, Wolfman does have nards,
Exactly.
but yeah, they could easily bring them all together, like you said, at the very end, tail end, at the 60s. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be like you could bring Van Helsing with a team of other people trying to take these monsters down because they all came together. We've already seen this kind of like in this dark style universe or the sorcery of the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the
Right.
current iteration of Werewolf by Night because we get a version of Man Thing in there. And
Right.
I've been looking forward to Man Thing for a long, long time. Now, mind you, Sci Fi had put out a crappy Man Thing movie and it was made as a horror movie. And
Right.
that, at least Werewolf by Night took that bad taste out of my mouth and gave me something
Well, you
interesting
know
for a
what?
special.
Werewolf by Night. Here's a great example of a franchise. They took all these monster characters, which are really universal monster characters. I mean, but
Hmm.
took all these monster characters and made it a fun show. I mean, that was what was it, 1 hour, I think?
It was a 1 hour special, and
Yeah,
they
a
look
one
to do
hour
that more.
special, and actually was great. It was in black and white, even though in the end, towards the very end, spoilers, towards the very end, is it's in color, but
Hmm.
um, it was a great movie. I mean, it was a great 1 hour special, and I thought, I mean, and again, that was a period piece. I think. I
Yes,
mean,
it was
they really didn't get into
the time or
the
whatever it
time or
was.
where what it was, but it felt like an old period piece, which was great, and it was just a fun show to watch. Man Thing I thought was done very well at first.
Hmm.
When I saw the trailer for it, I was very skeptical. I was like, I don't know. Like the brief shot that they showed of Man Thing, I was just like, that
I
looks
didn't even
horrible.
see that. That's the
Yeah,
funny thing.
in the trailer they do have them for like a split second,
I
like
didn't,
a
and
like
I never even noticed it. So that's what
yeah.
made when I watched the special, it made me so happy because there's a character. Now,
Yeah,
mind
but
you, it's rooted in
they did a
the
great job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even though the character is not like a universal monster per se, it was Marvel's idea, and then oddly enough, later on they did do a team up of those particular mystic or monster type of characters
Correct.
in a comic called Monster Squad. I think I have that issue, but it's got Morbius, Man Thing, Ghost Rider, and Werewolf by Night on the front cover alone,
Right.
and they team them all up, and it's not kind of them being heroic, but it's an interesting issue nonetheless.
Right.
But it was a way because if the Dark Universe were able to do that, and if they were to turn this over with like what we were just talking about, get these characters together, it would make for something that Universal could have banked on big
Yeah, it could
time.
have been really special, and I thought it could have been done very well. I was just thinking about what was it? Mel Brooks Love it. What was it? Love at First Bite? No, that was another. That was a different one, I think. What was the
Dracula
drag?
Dead and Loving It.
Something like that, And I'm thinking, well, what if we made a dark universe which was all comedic?
They could
but
still do it. It's
but I'm
like I
sure a lot
said,
of people.
we've had an Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein and the Wolfman,
Right,
and they
right.
could always bring those back, but you have to find prime comedians to pull it off as the straight man and the slapstick
It would
secondary.
have to be done so well. You would have to leave the theater basically with your stomach hurting of so much laughter that you would say, shit, I would love to see what they do with the other characters. But I'm sure a lot of hardcore Universal Monster fans would be like, well, why can't they just do a serious version? So that's always going to be that.
Well, I
I
am
think
one
they
of
could do
those people
both.
that would sit on that pulpit, but I also would be on the other side saying, "Hey, I want to see Impractical Jokers actually do that. I want to see
Right.
BQ and Sal and the rest of them have to deal with this, but as if it was a real thing for Impractical Jokers." Now, maybe I should like say that to Q when if I ever see him again, and be like, "Bro, you guys got to do this just for fun for a Halloween thing," and just get really good effects. And he'll be like, "Yeah, where are you gonna get the budget, pal?"
Again, we're talking about a movie that if we did the movie, I mean, would we change the plot? Yes, I think we would still keep it in Egypt. I think that's one of them.
Yes.
I think that
Effects wise,
It
it could be a little bit more practical.
it could be a little more practical. You're right. And I the one thing I did like, but they kind of it felt like it was just put in there, but and I think it should have been done a little bit better when they went into like the when Tom Cruise was walking with all those jars of these things inside, and you saw like the hand of the creature, you saw like the skull of a
Yeah,
vampire and things like that. I was like, cool, that's your way of telling us this is part of a bigger universe. I think they should have showed more.
yeah,
I think that should have been part of like,
they
whoa.
that was a pull from Predator 2. When you go
Yes.
see this skull closet and you see an alien, you see other aliens, you see a human skull, and then that's what teased us, and we finally got Alien versus Predator.
Yes.
But they also had a lot of goofs within this particular movie as well. The god Seti is referred to as the god of death, but in Egyptian mythology, Seti or Set was the god of chaos and violence, while Osiris was the god of death. So they
Right.
kind of got their history kind of screwed up for, like, I guess, artistic license, but you're going to have a true Egyptian out there, especially those people who love Moonlight. And Moonlight was great because you actually had people who were Egyptian that were on that set and could tell you everything about that.
Right.
So it's like try to stick to the real history of everything.
That was my big thing. It's like, hey, keep it in Egypt, keep, and you know what? Again, do a period piece. Who cares? I think a period piece would have been a better, because I don't know. For me, in today's world, a hidden, what is it? Or like all these monsters coming alive. I don't know. I always feel like the world is too modern for monsters. I don't, for those
Yeah,
type of
it
monsters.
is. And the one thing that they have to do is if Universal was smart about it, since a lot of streaming companies are out there, you got Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, all that stuff. If Universal had their own and then budgeted for their own standalone for holiday specials like this could
Right.
have been an easy 30 days of Halloween. They could have done a movie that could be about an hour each for each monster, put it out maybe once a week and get four monsters, and then have a bigger movie with all of them in one.
Problem is that Universal, just like every other studio out there that saw what Marvel did, everybody wanted to dip their toes
To the actual movie and get
into
that
the
movie
movie and
money. Yeah.
right, and make billions as opposed to just mere millions. So, and that's understandable. But when you do something like this, you got to have a plan, and you got to have a visionary that's going to say, "Hey, you want this universe to come together. We need to find the absolute best when it comes to that." And
Yeah,
that's
to
why I
mold
think
it together to make
to
it
mold it
work.
together and actually make it work.
Yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, my take on it, like I said, it's have it as a period piece,
Hmm.
have it as, not in the modern day, have it in Egypt.
Yep.
If you're gonna do the comedic roles, don't let Tom Cruise be the comedic person. Don't try to be a
Yeah,
comedic person
that's
because
exactly
he
it.
wasn't he just did not deliver very well. The dialogue, be a little more less how can I say, less formula. This just looked like a thing that just got thrown together. I don't know. It just didn't seem,
They read a screenplay book and how to write a scrplay and put
and
these
that's
things
exactly
in.
what
Yeah.
happened. Yeah. So I
Um,
don't know if I would have Sophia as the mummy. Um, I
nah,
would probably have her as some kind of, you know what? I would probably have her take over the Jake,
Jake Johnson
the
character.
Jake Johnson
Well, that
character.
would tap into Rachel Weisz's kind of character. They could have been a romantic interest, and then she could be easily be the one. Oh, wound up dead. Well, I'm here following you. Oh,
Right.
your knickers are.
Or you know what? Brother and sister. Something
Eh,
like that. Doesn't have to be a romantic interest because, every time you see those romantic interests, sometimes they always, leave the woman like, like the one that has to be rescued.
well,
I
that
would
was
rather,
Annabelle Wallace's character in this, if you think about it.
that is true.
And they gave him a romantic interest, and honestly, they could still have that in some way. You could have girls fighting each other, but I like
That's
Annabelle
the Mummy
Wallis.
too.
Yeah, right. Annabelle Wallis was pretty good, but I could see a different person playing that
Yeah.
particular character. I could see Diane Kruger taking that. If you remember her from like National Treasure, not to put her in that, to kind of put her in that position of being typecasted,
Right,
but
right.
she was perfect in National Treasure.
Yeah. No, so I think the direction on this was one, let's have again, I'm going back again. Let's have that visionary. Let's have not Tom Cruise be
Yeah,
the person in charge. Oh, and you know what? If Tom Cruise is like, well, I got to be in charge, and I was like, guess what, dude? You're not going to be in the movie. Fuck you.
yeah.
Moving on because honestly, while I know he's a big name, but there's other big names out there, and I'll keep putting The Shape of Water as an example of a great monster movie that did not have gigantic names. I mean, don't get me wrong, it had Octavia Spencer, it had Michael Shannon, but these are not like actors that are like,
Well
like
known. You've
they're
seen them
well, they're
before.
well known, but I'm not. What I'm talking about. They're not like what I would say. Box office attractions like The Rock or Tom Cruise that people are going to go into the movie theater just because it's them. This was a movie that just was so well done
Yeah,
and they had phenomenal actors in these roles
yeah.
that it made that movie such a great movie to begin with.
There
But
was
so,
care and attention with that particular movie. I don't
oh,
think there was as
absolutely.
much care and attention with this. This was meant to be your typical. I don't know when it came out exactly, but
Which one?
this one, the 2017 version, when did it actually premiere?
In June,
So it was
released in May.
okay. So was meant to be a summer blockbuster. Now, mind you, that is not a point to put a movie that is kind of rooted in the idea of Halloween. You
Exactly.
don't put that as a summer blockbuster. We're not interested in that. Tom Cruise, sorry. You put Top Gun out during the summer so you could watch it at a drive-in
Right.
and have fun with that and get all, because you riled up because of 4th of July. But no, not a horror movie. It's like, yeah, I want to be dark and gloomy and go see this movie. Yeah, it's like May or June. It's nice and bright and sunny out. I want to see a dark horror movie.
Yeah.
you know?
No, exactly. So, and also, I mean, let's put the budget the right way because one of the big chunks of budget, believe it or not, was the fact that the scene where they were in the airplane and it was actually
Tumbling and,
twirling around and
yep.
all that stuff, that was actually done on a real airplane.
Mm,
So, I think it's called a vomit comet or something like that,
yep.
but they did 64 takes of these things. 64 fucking takes in order for them to because of course the airplane has to drop down faster than what gravity is going in order for them to start floating around. So and that was all again Tom Cruise's idea.
Yeah, because Tom Cruise wants to be the action adventure. Now, mind you, he also wants to take a Mission Impossible to space. So,
Yeah, that's
so
going to be
that
interesting.
he's trying to get the adrenaline going. Not to point a joke to my podcast, Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, which we did cover Top Gun Maverick, but he is an adrenaline junkie.
Yes,
Between
he
Mission
is.
Impossible, Top Gun, all these movies, he's there, and he's always running, and he's always in running from something towards something, breaking bones, especially in a Mission Impossible. Personally, he
Right.
broke his foot or something, and you know, stick to that action. They could have gotten somebody else to be an
I
attractor.
think this is I think if you're going to make it a horror film, you can make it a deep horror film. Like it's still going to have its
Yeah,
touch of humors and stuff like that, but you could really dive deep into the horror part of this whole thing. And make it, I don't care, make it rated R.
yeah. This was
I
PG
mean,
13, so
PG-13, it just, it was just kind of like,
it was them
again,
trying to get the family, everybody, pull on every age bracket at point,
correct.
just for people to come into the
It's the
theater.
whole, hey, let's make it safe for everybody to watch worldwide kind of thing. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, wasn't that rated R?
Yes,
Yes, that was rated R. And I don't know. Again, a lot of people didn't like it. The scores on that are pretty horrible. But I mean, the score on this one, the Rotten Tomato score on this movie is 15%
Wow.
from critics, 35% from audience. I
Well,
mean, because if it was the other way around, like right now, the movie Black Adam is 40% on Rotten Tomatoes for critics, but is 90% for the audience,
that's
which is
weird.
which is crazy. So that means that a lot of people are out there liking it, but the critics I just think it's horrible. I will give my my
Thoughts on
review,
that another
yeah,
time.
on
Yeah.
some other time because there's a lot I want to cover on that one.
Well,
Uh, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's 15%, and when you look at that, you're like, holy shit, this is pretty bad.
it is. It
You
is.
know, so
Now, here's something else that could be fixed too about the movie, The Mummy 2017.
sure.
Now, think about it. I like all aspects between effects, story, acting, the CG, everything else. The music did not grasp me at all, and
Oh, horrible.
Brian Tyler was not that good, and he recorded with an 84-piece orchestra and 32 voice choir at London's Abbey Road for this particular film.
Yeah, so
I'm like, really? Give me Ralph Bear McCreary.
yeah, no, or you know what? I mean the original for the one for the Brandon Fraser one. I believe it was I think it was Jerry Goldsmith. And let me tell you, that's an awesome soundtrack.
It
When I
was.
listen to the score,
Mhm.
that's a score, and again, that score actually um has a lot of that score has a lot of the tones of old Hollywood in it.
Yes.
So it really, really kind of puts you back in the hey, like almost the old Hollywood uh big, scores, where especially that were done like in the desert and or like let's say Lawrence of Arabia, things like that. And it really felt that way for me. And but this score just completely sucked. I mean, if I was gonna put somebody in it, maybe Hans Zimmer,
Yeah.
which he does pretty well. Maybe go, well, John Williams is just so
He's a little bit over the top, I would say, for this particular
he's
movie.
also right now.
He's highly
Listen,
sought after. That's the whole thing. You want a hit movie, everybody gets him.
right? No, but the thing with John Williams is that I think he would do a great job. The problem is he's way too busy for this kind of shit.
Yeah.
Well, he's first of all, he's way too old for this kind of shit.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is he's choosing his projects. Like I know he's doing the last Indiana Jones movie, and I know why he would do that because he's like, listen, I did all the others. If this is going to be the last movie,
It's
then I'm
secondhand to
gonna
him to actually do Indiana Jones or Star
right.
Wars film
Just like he
anyway.
did Star Wars, episode 9, he did it because he's like, okay, I'm going to close out the Star Wars
Yeah.
franchise finally. So this is his way of saying, I'm going to close out the Indiana Jones franchise finally. But this is a man that basically is going to retire or is almost retiring.
Yeah, he's
But
already Danny Glovering this shit.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, maybe this guy, the guy who did the Batman, and he also directed Werewolf by Night.
Yeah, director Michael Giacchino did Werewolf by
Giacchino,
Night.
yeah. So Michael Giacchino, I think, would have been also a great person to do probably the soundtrack on that.
No, he
Uh,
he was the director. He didn't do the soundtrack.
no, but no, actually, he did the soundtrack to Werewolf by Night too.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so he did both, which was actually really cool. You know who else could have been very good at this? Danny Elfman.
Danny Elfman can. He
Yeah.
goes outside his field. You don't have to listen. Hear everything as a Pee Wee's Big Adventure or Batman and Batman
Right.
Returns
Well, I
or
mean, he did
Nightmare on Elm
Sleepy
Street.
Hollow. Remember, he did Sleepy Hollow, and that was actually pretty good. So that at least is my take. I would do something like that. Be funny to see Christopher Walken's as the mummy.
I would like to see Willem Dafoe as Dracula, but he's already played that type of a character in a joke version of Nosferatu years ago.
Did oh, that's right, he did.
And
He
he's
did.
going to be reprising it because they're going to do another movie with him as Nosferatu again.
Right. That would have been funny.
What happened
Uh,
to our a screenwriter? I
yeah,
ate him.
yeah. So it's funny now that we're getting into like the joke part of it. As you know, I think we mentioned in another podcast, which Steven Spielberg did Amazing Stories, and there was that one episode of the Mummy
Hmm.
film that was being used, and I thought, my God, that what a funny episode that is. And that again is somebody who very creative decided to, okay, so how can we take this character which is so old now, the Mummy, and just make him funny and and updated, at least at that and at the time it came out, and they did a phenomenal job with that. So I know deep in my heart somebody can go out there and actually do a much better job with this. uh you know what, don't get Tom Cruise involved, that's what I say.
Yeah, same here. I agree. I agree completely. He could just be the actor, but nobody wants to do that. They're afraid of Tom Cruise, apparently.
Well, if not, you got, the Church of Scientology police coming, knocking on their door or something like that.
I don't think so.
Correct.
Let's go into the idea of like the tagline that they gave for this particular movie. Is literally a direct quote from Dr. Jekyll himself. That's from the film. It says, "Welcome to a new world of gods and monsters."
Which, from what I hear, that was a tagline from either the original or
Frankenstein,
or Frank, something like
the
that, right?
original
So
Frankenstein.
correct. So, um, I didn't mind. Here's the thing about Russell Crowe. He is one of the few actors that, when it comes to either doing a monologue or doing any kind of voiceover work, I would sit there and listen to him all day.
Oh,
He is just such an eloquent talker, and his voice just kind of commands. He's like Morgan Freeman in a way, where you could sit there and you could listen to them talk. I mean, if he did a books on tape, I would probably if he could do a books on tape on, I don't know, nuclear physics, and I'll listen to it, because he just the way he delivers the lines are great. And when he did that line, it was actually pretty cool. I mean, I didn't mind. But you're right, the tagline, they grabbed it from there because, again, they're trying to bring all these universes together, or all these movies together to make that universe.
yeah.
I didn't mind it, but I mean, what will you think? What will you put in there?
What, as a tagline?
Yeah, were you saying that you liked the tagline or you didn't like the tagline?
I did like the tagline for the fact it was basically taken straight from the original whale. I forget his name. Who originally wrote or did the original Frankenstein. They had a whole movie about him. I'm glad that they took it from there.
Right.
I wouldn't change it
Okay.
because literally they are gods and monsters to some degree. Because if you look at Jekyll and Hyde, that is a god. He's a doctor,
Right.
and same thing with the Invisible Man. Unfortunately, they didn't have like any trophies of him around because you can't see him. Um, but if you see anything from Frankenstein, you probably see a bunch of bolts on the side from his neck.
Right.
But
Okay.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't be able to come up with anything different. But it by using that tagline, it roots itself in the original 30s to 40s Universal monsters. So, like you stated, it should stay within that time period and that preference.
Okay.
Nothing necessarily has to be updated to the point where it's modern day, because people are going to look around going, hey, oh, look, it's a dead guy. He's got these bolts out of his neck. He's kind of palish green. Oh, well, it's something out of Rob Zombie.
Well, I think it's because when you look at the original Universal monsters, and when you look at, all they were done at, well, a lot of the Universal monsters were done, of course, in, pre 70s.
Yeah.
60s, 50s, and 40s and stuff like that. And some of them were period piece, some of them were just reflect, were actually being filmed at, around that time. We see it as a period piece because, of course, it was filmed then. But um, I don't know. I just think that now that we have so many horror films nowadays based on what it is today,
Hmm.
it's nice to have something that, you could go back.
It's nice to go back to the well of something that worked for film.
Yeah. So yeah, so just so you know, the accolades on this movie, the only thing this movie really got nominated for were the Golden Raspberry Awards. And
Wow.
Tom Cruise won for Worst Actor.
Wow.
So that's amazing that out of the entire movie, which was pretty bad,
Yeah.
he won on that. I wonder if he went to collect. Uh,
I highly doubt it. They probably just mailed it to him.
They probably did. Very few times you have actors that actually attend the ceremony, and they actually do it. Saying "screw it, I'm just gonna do it." But
They'll have it for just for fun. Hey, I'm here.
yes, I'm here exactly. So yeah, I mean, this is I mean, I'll be very interested to see what our audience will actually think about. I mean, for those who are horror film fans, how would you out there, how would you do what plot do you think the movie? Would you do it as a period piece? Would you do it in,
Hmm.
modern days? Would you include Tom Cruise or take him out of there, or change the entire cast? Who do you think as a director will actually work? I would be very interested to hear from anybody out there. For those of you who are like film score nuts, who do you think the film score would go to?
Yeah.
One thing we didn't mention was visual effects company. So the visual effects company that was actually involved with this was actually ILM, but also a company called MPC and DNEG or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah, MPC is a like a multinational company providing visual effects for like animation, motion design, and stuff like that. But DNEG is also a British visual effects company. But then they had, Industrial Light and Magic also involved in that. I think I would have done Weta because Weta's so good when it comes to these
Oh yeah.
characters, so I think they could have done a fantastic job on that. So that's my pick. So for those of you out there, who again, let us know what you think. What would you have done different? What's your fantasy pick for this movie to actually get it done? Or what do you want to see? Because from what I hear, they are trying to bring the Dark Universe back, and they're trying to see how they can actually revamp it. So what would you like to see for this movie, and and how it should go forward? Let us know on fantasy picks movie edition at gmail.com, and we are also on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, we're under fantasy picks movie edition. On Twitter, we're under fantasy picks me, and on Facebook, we're under fantasy picks movie edition also. So let us know. Just hit me up. Let me know. Senor Mark, where can they find you?
You can find me in a few places. Currently on Podcastica, we're doing. My friend Jamie and I are covering Sandman. We're finalizing with the last two episodes. Actually, the finale and the extra episode, which was Cats of a Thousand Dreams, according to Jamie, because that's what the original story was, and Calliope, which was it was a two-parter in one. It was like a special. You could hear me on Podcastica on Sandman Cast, so you just have to go to podcastica.com. You could
Right.
also hear me on Panels to Pixels podcast. Steve and I finished up She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. We're still covering Umbrella Academy, so look out for that. And then we'll be covering Werewolf by Night as well as for that special. Hopefully, it doesn't go after Halloween, but people like to celebrate Halloween still into November because there's November Coming Fire. You could also hear me on Adrenaline Cinema podcast. That should be the episode of Speed with my friend Kelly. It should be coming out. After that, I'll be doing Jason X as well with my friend Jamie Dimmick, who helps me out on Pounds to Pixels podcast. And as always, you could find Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, watched it in the 80s, and run for your lives on the Pyrocore Entertainment and Pyrocore Entertainment Network. And all you have to do is go to pyrocoreentertainment.com. You'll see links. You could check out all the other podcasts. You could check out the artist that does our network's art, as well as Panels to Pixels podcast and Adrenaline Cinema podcast. That would be Kirk Manley. So check out pyrocoreentertainment.com, and then check out all the other podcasts on the network. I could be found on Panels to Pixels podcast normally.
Awesome, man. So yeah, so that's gonna be our episode for Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. Again, hit me up or hit us up just to let us know what you think. And yeah, that's our show, man. So my name is Robert Moda. I was your host, and I have Mark with me today.
Have a good one.
All right, guys. We'll be seeing you. Take care.
Bye bye.